Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our chats with Emily, as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson contained in the Johnson edition. We turn now to poem 291, How the Old Mountains Drip with Sunset. We're going to point out her use of the word how in this poem 7 times. And it is an interesting word, the word how, and we'll see the way that she studies it. Here we have another sunset poem. I say another sunset poem because obviously Emily is very interested in the forces of nature, and more particularly the beauties of nature, especially in regards to sunsets. Our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at LearnStrong.net down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily, our playlist. I'm hopeful that you've already worked through our set of introductory comments. I'm hopeful that you've already been working with our preceding 290 poems. We just finished with 290 of Bronze and Blaze. If you have, then you know that Emily is always seeming to just, when she talks about nature, to be blown away by the beauty and the forces of nature. But she also seems to show a certain kind of tension between, on the one hand, nature, we can go back just to 290 to think about this, and on the other hand, art, and especially her art, we might say, or the ways in which art struggles to somehow be able to capture nature. When we get to poem 308, we'll maybe share some of this at the end of our lecture here. When we get to poem 308, she kind of seems to almost make fun or mock this tension, and then she takes it pretty seriously in the preceding poem 307 and also poem 569. As I say, we'll maybe take a look at this. Now, the question is, how do you describe the sunset in words? You know what I'm saying? It's like, we've often said that the difference between you and your dog or your cat is that you both can look at the sunset and only one of you can appreciate it. That, of course, is an argument made by Aristotle in his Poetics. We've given full lectures at LearnStrong.net. But in this poem, the word how is repeated 7 times. I also want you to pay attention to her amazing use of verbs in this poem. It's quite remarkable. How the old mountains drip with sunset, how the hemlocks burn, how the dunbrake is draped in cinder by the wizard sun, how the old steeples hand the scarlet till the ball is full. Have I the lip of the flamingo that I dare to tell? Then how the fire ebbs like billows touching all the grass with a departing sapphire feature as a duchess passed. How a small dusk crawls on the village till the houses blot, and the old flambeaux no men carry glimmer on the streets. How it is night in nest and kennel, and where was the wood? Just a dome of abyss is bowing into solitude. These are the visions, flitted Guido, Titan, never told. Domenichino dropped his pencil, paralyzed with gold. Guido, Titan, Domenichino, 3 great Italian Baroque, Christian Baroque artists that are always trying to figure out how to show or display the majestic powers of nature. She makes the argument, even those 3 amazing artists weren't able to do the thing I am here trying to do in words. Again, notice a repetition of the word how here. How the, again, old mountains, old steeples drip with sunset. Again, this power of her verbs are remarkable. How the old hemlocks here are the North American fir trees, takes us back to poem 41. Burn, right? Now there's been readings, the scholar Wolf has done a tremendous reading of this poem as something approaching a theological treatise. I'm going to stay away from much of that for this discussion, but I certainly recommend that you run it to ground. It's quite a remarkable study. How the hemlocks burn. Of course, hemlocks immediately as well make us think of Socrates and 399 and Plato's Apology and Plato's Phaedo and that project. We've given full lectures at LearnStrong.net. And again, the repetition of the anaphoria here at the beginning of the line, how the dun brake is draped in cinder. We're back to the idea of burning, only now notice the changing to cinder by the wizard sun. Now, this use of the word wizard in poem 122, you'll remember the wizard fingers never rest. And poem 177, you'll remember, necromancy sweet, wizard erudite, Teach me the skill that I instill, the pain surgeons assuage in vain, nor herb of all the plain can heal. The only other times that she uses this word, wizard, all of this is being done by the wizard son. I find it interesting that we begin with wizards and we end with Titan and Guido and the like, right? Those amazing wizards of painting, if you will. Then she's back to it after a break of 4 lines. How the old steeples, first it was old mountains, now it's old steeples, hand the scarlet. And again, all of this is about the sunset. Again, the sun is going down, so the light is playing off of all of these different objects. How the old steeples hand the scarlet. Notice again, we're back to colors. Till the ball is full. This idea that all the different lights are changing, right? Have I, and then finally she injects herself into the poem, much like the last poem about the Northern Lights. Have I the lip of the flamingo, taking us when we meet it at poem 748, that I dare to tell. Now, I can't help but read this line and think about Wordsworth's lines composed a few miles above Tintern Abbey, where he says, and so I dare to hope, though changed no doubt from what I was when first I came among these hills. We've given full lectures of that at learnstrong.net. This idea, though, of do I dare to tell is, in my estimation, the keynote of this poem. In other words, do I have the courage to try to describe in words what Titan, for example, couldn't do in his paintings? Then we're back to the next of the hows. Then, how the fire, and again, notice from cinder to fire, we're obviously we're playing around with images here, ebbs like billows, touching all the grass, and immediately we think about her use of the word grass in 290 as well, the dishonored grass. Grass with a departing sapphire, back to poem 191, feature, and then it's an interesting word picture as a duchess passed. In other words, it's almost as if the beautiful earrings of a duchess or something showing light, scattering light, and then gone. And then another how a small, I told you in 77 poems she'll use this word small, dusk, capitalize, crawls on the village. Again, her use of these words from drip to crawl is quite remarkable. Till the houses blot. I like her use of the word blot because it's almost as if she's telling us she's going to end with some referencing to painters, right? And the odd flambeau, we notice we go from flamingo to flambeau, back to poem 122, which is interesting because in 122 we've also got the wizard there mentioned. Flambeau, no men carry glimmer on the street. And again, I love the use of the word glimmer, from fire to glimmer. How, another how now, it is night. So notice again, sunset. How do you describe this process of the lights departing and all of the shading? How it's night in nest and kennel, and where was the wood? It's like, I know what I saw, but now I can't see it anymore, and in some powerful way it's gone. Just a dome of abyss. I find it fascinating. She uses this word dome, and we think about, of course, the most important dome in Florence, and then all of a sudden she's going to make this references to these great Italian Baroque and Renaissance painters. Just a dome of abyss. She'll go from abyss to solitude. Obviously, emptiness is a potentiality here. Is bowing into solitude. This word bowing has a certain resonance to worship, no doubt, right? Or obsequity, right? Bowing. And then she finishes with that word solitude. And then she'll say it. These are the visions flitted. We'll see this in poem, this word flitted in poem 1384 and 1436. I'll let you study it on your own. Flitted, she'll mention then Guido and Titan and Domenichino. All three great artists. And yet she said that Guido and Titan, they never could figure it out. And Domenichino dropped his pencil because he was like, okay, I can't capture what it is that I'm seeing. And then all of them were paralyzed. The only use in all of her poetry of that word paralyzed is here. I think it's the key word. I think the point is that it is translinguistic with gold. So notice the power of this poem, that we finish with this word gold. And, you know, we use this euphemistically even, right? That is gold, or golden meaning precious, or, you know, important and the like. In some ways, if you'll think of it, we are back to poem 110 when we read it, and I think when we did 110, I forecasted we would be here, so let's enjoy it. Artist wrestled here, lo, a tent cashmere, lo, a rose, student of the year, for the easel here, say, repose. We'll want to finish with 3 other poems of Emily Dickinson, but we'll get to those in a second. Let's first just talk it to what is she saying in this poem in terms of themes, messages? I think she's arguing that nature is translinguistic. And in this regards, obviously, she fits in with the other transcendentalists that we've talked about. Obviously, Emerson and Thoreau. We've given full lectures on all the essays, and of course, Walden. They as well, Thoreau made this very observation several times. And of course, Walt Whitman, he played the same game. Emily fits in that pantheon of those writers that were able to point out, we look at it, we're blown away by it, but we somehow can't summarize it or contain it in words. It's beyond us. At 2b, I love her use of the word how, because how can be both a question as well as an affirmation, and she'll play both games. Like, how does it do that? And then as well, how powerful that is, the options. I want to go now to 3 poems that we mentioned already. Let's just read them. We're not going to exegete. Let's just read them. First of all, back to back, 307 and 308. 307. The one who could repeat the summer day were greater than itself, though he, minutest of mankind, should be, and he could reproduce the sun at period of going down, the lingering and the staying, when Orient have been outgrown and Occident become unknown, his name remain. And then poem 308. I send 2 sunsets, day and I, in competition ran. I finished 2 in several stars, while he was making 1. His own was ampler, but as I was saying to a friend, mine is the more convenient to carry in the hand. And then finally, when we get to poem 569, much has been made of this poem. I reckon, when I count it all, first poets, then the sun, then summer, then the heaven of God, and then the list is done. But looking back, the first seems to comprehend the whole. The others look a needless show. So I write, poets, all. Their summer lasts a solid year, they can afford a sun. The East would deem extravagant, and if the further heaven be beautiful as they prepare, for those who worship them, it is too difficult a grace to justify the dream. Finally, to own a poem like this at 3b, what is your favorite example of how nature is translinguistic? And to what degree are you smiling that Emily is trying to do the very thing she says we obviously can't do? Thank you.